As he rose, his ears were assaulted by the sound of beeping electronics and yelling and laughing kids. It took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust from the darkness of the pit to the brightness that now surrounded him, the flashing lights and vivid colors. He looked around and muttered, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. The walls were lined with shiny arcade cabinets housing games he heard his dad talk about in his own childhood. Ms. Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Cubert, Galaga. A neon-lighted claw machine displayed plush blue elf-like creatures and orange cartoon cats. He looked down at the pit and realized he was surrounded by little kids wallowing in the strangely clean and now brightly colored plastic orbs. He stood over the preschoolers like a giant. He stepped out of the pit to find his shoes, but they were gone. Standing on the colorful carpet in his socked feet, he looked around. There were lots of kids his age and younger, but there was something different about them. Everyone's hair was styled and fluffy, and the boys wore polo shirts and colors lots of guys wouldn't be caught dead in, like pink or aqua. The girls' hairs and girl hair were almost unbelievably big, with bangs that stood out from their foreheads like claws. They wore pastel colored tops that matched their pastel colored shoes. The colors, the lights, the sounds. It was sensory overload. And what was that music? Oswald looked around to see where it was coming from. Across the room, on a small stage, a trio of animatronic animals blinked their big blank eyes, opened and closed their mouths, and pivoted back and forth in sync with a jangly, annoying song. There was a brown bear, a blue rabbit with a red bow tie, and some kind of bird girl. They reminded Oswald of the mechanical animals he caught himself drawing lately. The difference was, he could never decide if the animals in his drawings were cute or creepy. These were creepy. Strangely, though, the dozen or so little kids surrounding the stage didn't seem to think so. They were wearing birthday party hats with pictures of the characters on them, and dancing and laughing and having a great time. When the smell of pizza hit Oswald's nose, he understood. He was still in Jeff's Pizza, or more accurately, what Jeff's had been before Jeff took over. The ball pit was new and not roped off. All the outlets on the walls had arcade games plugged into them, and he turned around to face the left wall. In the shapes of the shadows on the wall of Jeff's Pizza was a mural of the same characters performing on stage: the brown bear, the blue rabbit, and the bird girl. Below their faces were the words Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Oswald's insides turned to ice water. How had this happened? He knew where he was, but he didn't know when it was or how he got there. Somebody bumped into him, and he jumped more than was normal. Since he felt physical contact, this must not be a dream. He couldn't decide if this fact was if it was good news or not. Sorry, dude, the kid said. He was about Oswald's age, and he was wearing a light yellow polo with the collar turned up, tucked into what looked like a pair of dad jeans. The white tennis shoes he had on were huge, like clown shoes. He looked as if he spent a long time fixing his hair. Are you okay? Yeah, sure, Oswald said. He wasn't sure he was okay, actually, but he didn't know how to begin to explain his situation. I've not seen you here before, the kid said. Yeah, Oswald said, trying to figure out an explanation that wouldn't sound too weird. I'm just visiting here, staying with my grandma for a few weeks. This place is great, though, all these old games. Old games, the kid said, raising an eyebrow. You're joking, right? I don't know about where you're from, but Freddy's has the newest games around here. That's why the lines to play them are so long. Oh, yeah, I was just kidding, Oswald said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. He had his he had heard his dad talk about playing a lot of these games when he was a kid. Absurdly hard games, he said, on which he wasted many hours and many quarters. I'm Chip, the kid said, running his fingers through his poofy hair. Me and my buddy Mike. He nodded at a tall black kid wearing huge eyeglasses and a shirt with wide red and blue stripes. We're about to play some skee ball. Want to come with? Sure, Oswald said. It was nice to hang out with some other kids, even if they seemed to be other kids from another time. He didn't think this was a dream, but it was sure as weird as one. You got a name? Mike said, looking at Oswald like he was some kind of strange specimen. Oh, sure, I'm Oswald. He had been too weirded out to remember to introduce himself. Mike gave a friendly slap on the back. Well, I've got to warn you, Oswald. I'm a beast at skee ball, but I'll go easy on you since you're new here. Thanks for having mercy on me, Oswald said. He followed them to the skee ball area. On the way, they passed somebody in a rabbit suit that looked like a yellow version of the animatronic rabbit on the stage. Nobody else seemed to be paying attention to the rabbit guy, so Oswald didn't say anything. It was probably a Freddy Fazbear employee dressed up to entertain the little kids up at the birthday party. Mike wasn't kidding about being a beast at skee ball. He easily beat Chip and Oswald 3 times, but he was a good sport, and he spent the whole time joking around. It felt good being included. But after another couple of games, Oswald started to worry. What time was it really? How long had his dad been looking for him? And how was he going to get back to his real life? Sure, he wanted to give his dad a little scare, but he didn't want to scare the old man so much that he got the police involved. Hey guys, I better run, Oswald said. My grandma, he almost said, just texted me, but realized Chip and Mike would have no idea what he was talking about. Whatever this was, and whenever this was, there were no cell phones. My grandma's supposed to pick me up in a few minutes. Okay, dude, maybe we'll catch you later, Chip said, and Mike gave a little nod and wave. Oswald left his companions, stood in a corner in his sock feet, and wondered what to do. He was having some kind of magical experience. He was late getting back, and he was missing his shoes. He was like some kind of mixed up guy Cinderella. How to get back? He could walk out the front door of Freddy Fazbear's, but where would that take him? It might be the right place to find his dad's car waiting, but it wasn't the right time, not the right decade even. Then it dawned on him. Maybe the way out was the same way he got in, at the ball pit. A mom was telling her 2 little kids it was time to leave. They tried to argue with her, but then she turned on her stern mom voice and threatened them with an early bedtime. Once they got out, he got in. He sank beneath the surface before anybody could see that a kid over the height limit was in the ball pit. How long to stay under? Randomly, he decided to count to 100, then stand. He rose to his feet and found himself standing in the dusty roped off ball pit at Jeff's Pizza. He climbed out and found his shoes right where he left them. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He took it out and read, "We'll be out there in 2 minutes." He had no time passed at all. He headed to the door, and Jeff called, "See ya, kid," behind him. "This looks great, Mom," Oswald said, spearing a sausage link with his fork. "You're in a good mood today." Mom slid a waffle onto his plate. "Quite a contrast from yesterday when you were Mr. Grumpy Pants." "Yeah," Oswald said. "They're supposed to get my book in the library today." The statement was true, but it wasn't the reason Oswald was in a good mood. Of course, it wasn't like he could tell her the real reason. If he said, "I discovered a ball pit at Jeff's Pizza that lets me travel in time," Mom would be dropping the waffles and picking up the phone to call the nearest child psychologist. Oswald picked up his book at the library, but he was too impatient to read it. He headed over to Jeff's Pizza as soon as it opened at 11. Jeff was in the kitchen when he got there, so he made a beeline for the pit. He shucked off his shoes, stepped in, and sank into the depths. Since it seemed to work before, he counted to 100 before he stood. The animatronic band was playing some weird jangly song that was partially drowned out by the beeping, blipping, and dinging of a variety of games. He wandered the floor and took in the games. The whack-a-mole, the neon-lighted token suckers that let you win some tickets, but probably not, if you push the button at the right time. Older kids crowded around the video games. Preschoolers climbed on the crayon-colored play equipment. Pink eye, Oswald thought, though he had no room to talk, the way he was diving into the ball pit these days. Everything looked as it had before. He had even caught sight of a calendar hanging in the open office that helped him pinpoint the date. 1985. Hey, it's Oswald! Chip was wearing a baby blue polo with his dad jeans, and giant sneakers this time. Not a hair on his head was out of place. "Hey, Oz," Mike said. He was wearing a Back to the Future t-shirt. "Anybody ever call you like that? Like the Wizard of Oz?" "They do now," Oz said, grinning. He had gone from having the loneliest summer ever to having 2 new friends and a nickname. True, all these seemed to be happening in the mid-1980s, but why get hung up in the details? "Hey," Chip said. "We just ordered pizza. You want to come have some?" We ordered a large, so there's more than we can eat. Speak for yourself, Mike said, but he was grinning. Okay, Chip said. How about I say it's more than we should eat? Want to join us? Oswald was curious how Freddy Fazbear's pizza compared with Jeff's. Sure, thanks. On the way to their table, they passed someone the same yellow rabbit suit who was standing in a corner still as a statue. Chip and Mike either didn't see him or ignored him, so Oswald tried to ignore him as well. Why hide in the corner like that, though? If he worked for the restaurant, surely he wasn't supposed to act all creepy. At the table, a young woman with big blonde hair and blue eyeshadow served them a large pizza and a pitcher of soda. In the background, the animatronic band played on. The pizza was pepperoni and sausage, with a crispy crust. A nice change from plain cheese slices. You know, Mike said between bites, when I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's band. I even had a stuffed Freddy I used to sleep with. Now I look up at the stage, and those things give me the creeps. It's weird, huh? How stuff you like as a little kid gets creepy when you're older. Chip helped himself to another slice. Like clowns. Yeah, or dolls, Mike said, between bites. Sometimes I look at my sister's dolls all lined up on the shelf in her room, and it's like they're staring at me. Oh, like the guy in the yellow, it's like, or like the guy in the yellow rabbit costume, Oswald thought. But he didn't say anything. After they demolished the pizza, they played some skee ball, Mike mopping the floor with them again, but being really nice about it. Oswald didn't worry about time anymore, because apparently time here didn't pass the same way as his own time zone. After skee ball, they took turns playing air hockey in pairs. Oswald was surprisingly decent at it, and he even managed to beat Mike once. When they started to run low on tokens, Oswald thanked them for sharing their wealth and said he hoped to see them again soon. After they said their goodbyes, Oswald waited until no one was looking and disappeared into the pit. Hanging out with Chip and Mike turned into a regular thing. Today they weren't even playing games. They were just sitting at a booth, drinking sodas, and talking, trying to ignore the animatronic animals. It was annoying music as much as they could. You know what movie I liked? Chip said. His polo shirt was peach colored today. Oswald loved the guy, but really, did he own one shirt that wasn't the color of an Easter egg? The Eternal Song. Seriously? Mike said, pushing his huge glasses up on his nose. The movie was so boring. I was like, The Eternal Song is the perfect title for this movie because I didn't think it was going to end. I don't think it's ever gonna end. They all laughed. Then Chip said, What did you think of it, Oz? I haven't seen that one, Oswald said. He had said that a lot when hanging out with Chip and Mike. Oswald always listened to them talk about movies and shows they liked. When they mentioned one he didn't know, he'd look it up online when he got home. He made a list of 80s movies he wanted to watch and check the TV listings on the DVR to see when any of them might be showing. Oswald participated in Chip and Mike's conversations as much as he could. It was kind of like being a foreign exchange student. He sometimes had to fake his way through by smiling and nodding and being generally agreeable. Man, you need to get out more, Mike said. Maybe you can go to the movies with Chip and me sometime. That'd be cool, Oswald said. Because what else could he say? Actually, I'm from the distant future, and I don't think it's physically possible for me to see you any place but in a Freddy Fazbear's in 1985. They'd both think that was a joke on Mike, because his favorite movie was Back to the Future. Name one movie you've seen that you really liked, Chip said to Oswald. I'm trying to figure out what your taste is. Oswald's mind went blank. What was a movie from the 1980s? E.T. E.T., Mike slapped the table, laughing. It's like, E.T. was like 3 years ago. You really do need to get out more. Do they not have movie theaters where you come from? They do, Oswald thought. And they have Netflix and PlayStation and YouTube and social media. But he didn't say it. Of course, there was technology Chip and Mike talked about. He had only known with the only vaguest of knowledge of, like VCRs and boomboxes and cassette tapes, and he constantly had to remind himself not to talk about things like cell phones and tablets and the internet. He tried not to wear T-shirts with characters and references that might confuse them on that them or the other customers at the 1985's Freddy Fazbear's. Yeah, we definitely need to bring you up to date, Chip said. If you only knew, Oswald thought. Hey, Do you want to go play some games? Mike said. I feel the skee ball calling me, but I promise I'll go easy on you guys. Chip laughed. No, you won't. You'll murder us. You guys go ahead, Mike said. Oswald said. I think I'll just stay at the table. What, and watch the show? Mike said, nodding in the direction of the creepy characters on the stage. Is something wrong? If you've suddenly decided you like Freddy Fazbear's music, we need to get you help fast. No, nothing's wrong, Oswald said. But really, something was. For his first few visits to the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's, it hadn't even occurred to him that he was basically mooching off Chip and Mike's generosity, because he never had money of his own. And even if he wasn't broke in his own time, would the money he brought from the present even work in 1985? It was kind of pitiful, being broke in 2 decades. Finally, he said, I just feel like I'm always taking your money because I never have any. Hey dude, it's cool, Chip said. We hadn't even noticed. Yeah, Mike said. We just figured your grandma never gave you any money. I know my grandma doesn't, except when it's my birthday. They were being really nice, but Oswald still felt embarrassed. If they had talked about his lack of money, that meant they noticed it, and they had noticed it. How about I just go hang out with you guys while you play? Oswald said. When he stood up, he felt a strange heaviness in his pockets. Something in them was so heavy he felt like his jeans might fall down. He reached in his pockets and pulled out 2 double handfuls of 1985's Freddy Fazbear game tokens. He produced handful after handful and dumped them on the table. Or we could play using these, he said. He had no idea how to explain the magic that had just occurred. I guess I forgot I was wearing these pants, the ones with tokens in them. Chip and Mike looked a little confused, but then they grinned and started taking coin and raking coins from the table into their empty soda cups. Oswald did the same. He decided just to go with the weirdness. He didn't know how the tokens got there, but then again, he didn't really know how he got there either. In the morning, as Dad was driving him to the library, Oswald asked, Dad, how old were you in 1985? I was just a couple years older than you, Dad said. And other than baseball, all I could think about was how many quarters I had to spend at the arcade. Why do you ask? No reason in particular, Oswald said. I've just been doing some research. Jeff's Pizza, before it was Jeff's Pizza. It was some kind of arcade, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Dad's voice sounded strange. Nervous, maybe. He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, But it closed. Like everything else in this town, Oswald said. Pretty much, yeah, said, pulling up in front of the library. Maybe it was Oswald's imagination, but it seemed like his dad was relieved to get to their destination, so he wouldn't have to answer any more of his questions. At 11 o'clock sharp, Oswald headed over to Jeff's Pizza as it had become a habit. With Jeff nowhere in sight, Oswald proceeded to the pit. After his count to 100, he stood. There were the noises, as but not the usual of Freddy Fazbear's. Screams, crying children, yells for help, the fast footfalls of people running. Chaos. Were Chip and Mike here? Were they okay? Was anybody here okay? He was afraid. Part of him wanted to disappear back into the pit, but he was worried about his friends. Also, he was burning with curiosity about what was going on. Even though he didn't know whatever it was horrible. And even though he knew whatever it was horrible. He wasn't in danger, he told himself, because this was the past, a time way before he was born. His life couldn't be in danger in a time before he even existed, could it? His stomach in knots. He moved through the crowd, past crying mothers running with their toddlers in their arms, past dads grasping children's hands and leading them swiftly towards the exit, and their faces masks of shock. Chip? Mike? He called, but his friends were nowhere to be seen. Maybe they hadn't come to Freddy Fazbear's today. Maybe they were safe. Scared, but feeling as if he had to know what was happening, Oswald walked in the opposite direction from everyone else, with an escalating feeling of dread. In front of him stood the man in the yellow bunny costume. If it was a man under there, the bunny opened a door that said private and went inside. Oswald followed. The corridor was long and dark. The rabbit looked at him with blank eyes, and an unchanging grin. Then he walked farther down the hall. Oswald wasn't chasing the rabbit, he was letting the rabbit lead him, as if were in a terrifying version of Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole. The rabbit stopped in front of a door with a sign reading "Party Room" and beckoning for Oswald to come inside. Oswald was shaking with terror, but he was too curious to refuse. Besides, he kept thinking, "You can't hurt me. I haven't even been born." Once inside the room, it took Oswald a few seconds to register what he was actually seeing, and a few more seconds for his brain to process it. They were lined up against the wall, which were painted with images of the place's mascots: the grinning bear, the blue bunny, and the bird girl. Half a dozen kids, none of them older than Oswald, their lifeless bodies propped into sitting positions, their legs stretched out in front of them. Some of them had their eyes closed as if asleep. Others' eyes were opened, frozen in an empty doll like stare. They were all wearing Freddy Fazbear birthday party hats. Oswald couldn't tell how they had died, but he knew the rabbit was responsible for it. That the rabbit had wanted him to see his handiwork. Maybe the rabbit wanted Oswald to be his next victim, to join the others lined against the wall with their unseeing eyes. Oswald screamed. The yellow rabbit lunged for him. He ran out of the room and down the black corridor. Maybe the rabbit could hurt him. Maybe he couldn't. Oswald didn't want to hang around long enough to find out. He ran across the now empty arcade towards the ball pit. Outside, the police sirens' screams matched Oswald's own. The rabbit ran after him, getting so close that a fuzzy paw brushed Oswald's back. Oswald dove into the pit. He counted 100 as fast as he could. When he stood, the first thing he heard was Jeff's voice. "There's the little stinker." Oswald turned to see his dad stomping toward him. It's like, while Jeff looked on. Dad looked furious, and Jeff didn't look happy either. Not that he ever did. Oswald stood frozen, too overwhelmed to move. His dad grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the pit. "What were you thinking hiding in that nasty old thing?" Dad said. "Didn't you hear me calling you?" After Oswald was out, his dad leaned over the pit. "Look at how dirty this is. Your mother—" A pair of yellow arms reached out of the pit and pulled Dad under. The struggle would have been cartoonish if it hadn't been so terrifying. Dad's feet in their brown work boots kicked up to the surface, only to disappear below. Then a pair of big fuzzy yellow feet appeared, only to disappear too. The balls in the ball pit roiled like a stormy sea. Then they were still. The yellow rabbit rose from the pit, adjusted his purple bow tie, brushed off his front, and turned towards Oswald, grinning. Oswald backed away, but the rabbit was beside him, its arms firmly around Oswald's shoulders, guiding him towards the exit. Oswald looked at Jeff, who stood behind the counter. Maybe Jeff would help him, but Jeff wore the same hangdog expression he always wore and just said, "See you later, guys." How could anyone act like this situation was normal? Once the rabbit got him, it opened the passenger door of Dad's car and pushed Oswald in. Oswald watched as the bunny buckled its seatbelt and started the car. He tried to open the door, but the bunny had activated the power lock from the driver's side. The bunny's mouth was frozen in a ridiculous grin. Its eyes stared blankly. Oswald pushed the unlock button again, even though he knew it wouldn't work. "Wait!" Oswald said. "Can you do any of this? Can you even drive a car?" The bunny said nothing, but started the car and pulled it into the street. It stopped at a red light, so Oswald figured it must be able to see and must know the basic rules of driving. "What did you do to my dad? Where are you taking me?" Oswald could hear the panic in his voice. He wanted to sound strong and brave, like he was standing up for himself, but instead he just sounded scared and confused, which he was. The bunny said nothing. The car made a familiar right turn, then a familiar left turn, into Oswald's neighborhood. "How do you know where I live?" Oswald demanded. Still silent, the bunny turned to the driveway in front of Oswald's ranch-style house. "I'll run for it," Oswald thought. "As soon as this thing unlocks the car door, I'll run to a neighbor's house and call the police once I'm safely inside." The locks clicked, and Oswald jumped out of the car. Somehow, the bunny was standing right in front of him. It grabbed his arms. He tried to break free, but its grip was too strong. The bunny dragged Oswald to the front door, then yanked off the chain around Oswald's neck that held his house key. The rabbit turned the key to the door and shoved Oswald inside. Then it stood in front of Oswald, blocking the exit.